Thank you for coming. This is the call to order for our budget meeting number 1, Thursday, May 9th. With that, we will have a flag pledge. Flag is to my left. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we have roll call, so we'll do the whole year. We'll go appointed budget committee members. Jeff Bridges. Juliana Selden. Step down. Bob Dillard. Here. Here. Sandy Pearson. Jeffrey Lang. Here. Dina Lasky. She joining by Zoom. Hey, Matt, is Dina there by Zoom? What's that, Michelle?
I was sent a link for the.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, I couldn't tell if there was someone on the screen or not.
Yes, there is.
Someone. Okay. Who is that? Oh, Carol. Couldn't see. All right. Okay, the elected budget committee members, Nathan McClintock. Mary Schilling. We got there we are. Carol Yardley joining us by Zoom. Dallas Pettenbrink. Close. Jim Jordan, that's me. Julie Thies. Michelle. Okay. That's the roll call. Again, you know what I forgot to do? Let's go ahead and we should do introductions because we don't know all everybody. So if you could maybe we'll start at the end with Mr. Lang, and if you could just tell us your name, how long you've been in town, and what you do, and
Sure.
anything else on your heart.
Anything else on my heart? Hello, I'm Jeff Lane. Let's see, I'm the CEO at Cofield Valley Hospital. I've been in the area since October of 2017. So I came here from the Midwest. Before coming here, I was at a hospital in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then before that in Minnesota, and Minnesota is home. So, and my wife works in the district. She's vice principal at the high school. So.
Michelle Roberts. I've lived here almost 25 years. And as well as being married almost 25 years. And I've raised all 4 kids in the North Bend School District. My final child is a freshman this year.
My name is Chris Cahill, and I was born and raised in Coos Bay. Went to school through the Coos Bay School District, went to Oregon State, and came back here in 2005. Own a small business in Coos Bay, and my wife is employed here in the district. And I have a first grader, and he's going to be a kindergartner next year. So I'll have 2 students within the district.
Hey, Jim Jordan, I've lived in the district for right at 25 years. I retired from Chevron. I was a petroleum engineer for 34 years, working for them. Retiree, love to serve, ranch, and school board, I guess. School boarding can be a verb.
My name is Jeff Bridges. I'm the finance director with the city of North Bend. I've lived in North Bend School District now for about 3 years. Prior to that, I've spent 6 years over in Lane County and was finance director for the Housing Authority over there. Prior to that, I have about 20 years of experience as a CPA and audits of state and local governments. Oh, and my fiance works in the district office.
All right, Bob Dillard. I've been here for 42 years. I worked for the city for 36 years, retired as director of public works. We own Postal Paper and Supply right down the street. And my son graduated from here as a valedictorian. And my wife's on the scholarship committee in North Bend.
I'm Julie Thies. I've lived here for almost 22 years. I was born and raised in Coquille. I have 4 kids that have gone through the North Bend School District all the way from kindergarten through graduation.
Mary Schilling.
I retired in 2008. I worked for Kern County in Bakersfield, California. And retired up here with my husband about that time and been on the school board for going on 4 years.
I'm Nathan McClintock. I'm an attorney, Corrigal McClintock in Coos Bay. Moved here in '94, from the Portland area. Before that, I was in the Bay Area. The Bay Area. Anyway, I have 2 kids, 16-year-old sophomore twins that, are at North Bend. Anyway, that's about it.
No,
Is that me? All right. I'm Dallas Brink. I've been in the area for about 32 years. I'm Cajun boy from Louisiana, Texas area. My mom was an opening manager for Walmart, so that brought us to the area. Graduated Marshfield, graduated Swamp, valedictorian. Worked at Swamp for about 16 years. I now do IT consulting and work with brokerage shops. And I've been on the board since November.
all right, thank you for that. Okay, next item on the agenda, approval of the agenda. And anybody have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the agenda as written. Is there any discussion or comment? Okay, with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? There's too many of us for me to tell by the voices, so, okay. I think we have unanimous for who's here.
And
Michelle.
Bob second that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, item 4, elections. So what we'll do is for elections, we'll have nominations for each position. The chairperson will be the first. Typically, in the previous 2 years I've been here, it was someone from the appointed budget people or members. I don't recall that it had been someone from the elected board. And then once we elect the chairperson, then the gavel, you get the gavel and the little schmear. You then do the elections for the vice chair, secretary. Then there's a budget message delivered by that team right there. And presentation and open for discussion, and we adjourn. So with that, are there any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Jim as chairman.
Not supposed to do that, Bob. I'll get you back. Are there any other nominations of very well qualified people who would like to seek the chairmanship?
I'll nominate Bob Dillard.
Oh, don't do that.
I'll second that.
I can't, do we need a second on these or no? You just get nominated?
I think you can just get nomination and you just kind of vote. I think you have to have a second on nomination.
Yeah, the nomination does have to be accepted. It doesn't have to. You don't have to accept the nomination. Just so you guys all know. Robert Shields.
Don't tell him.
I'm just. This opportunity. We can go back.
We can go back. Any other nominations for?
Does anybody want it?
On the budget.
I can look at my feet longer than anybody here. Okay, there's two nominees. I think we'll close the nominations and we'll start with the votes. And I think you're gonna have to raise your hand because I won't be able to. Everyone in favor of Bob Dillard to be the chairman, raise your hand. Okay, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
We got a.
We have a
9.
hand up online. There's 2 online.
Oh, this.
Did I count myself?
2 online.
2 online.
Oh, Carol and
this-
Dina, I'm sorry. Carol, how do you vote?
You're off. No sound.
Thumbs up or down?
I can't tell. Okay, that's another vote. Is that 10 votes for Bob? And then, is that Dina Lasky? Is she there too? Okay, so I've lost count. Is that 12?
That's just-
Looking good.
11. Votes for Jim. Bob Dillard, congratulations, sir. You are recognition of your life experience, your city. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Do we have nominations for a vice chair?
If they're gonna do it, would anybody like to do it?
I nominate, Jim.
Okay, okay.
Are you conceding?
What's that?
Are you conceding?
I can, if you need someone to do it, I'll do it.
Accept it.
I'll do it. If I get the votes.
Do we have any, second nomination?
Is there anybody interested in doing it? No.
Okay, all in favor? Jim being vice chair. Good job.
Thank you, Bob.
Now, do we have any nominations for secretary?
I nominate Mary.
Second.
You don't have to accept it. You wanna smack me now?
What does the secretary do? Well, can I nominate?
Did you want to nominate? someone?
You can nominate somebody.
Nominate Dan.
I'll nominate Julie.
Well,
I'll second.
I am the worst at taking notes. If you guys want notes, you're not getting them from me. Sorry,
If
something I need to.
I may, we do still, Michelle is still taking minutes of the meeting in her normal capacity.
What's
So
the purpose of
the
this?
secretary. The secretary is not going to be responsible for taking our minutes.
Okay.
So that's just so that, don't worry about it if you're named secretary.
But we'll compare just for fun.
Mary it is.
We have two nominations.
Julie was nominated.
Who?
Julie.
She nominated me. I nominated her. She could do that.
Okay, so first, all in favor of Mary? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4.
And
Is that?
One online.
One.
Dean Lasky said, it also is a deaf vote to
And what did
online.
Carol say?
Yeah.
Carol's waiting to vote for you.
Yeah, Carol.
Okay, that was 9, I believe, was it?
Oh, that's majority.
Yeah. So, all in favor of Julie?
Oh.
I'll do that again, I'll vote twice. 5, 6.
You didn't have to stuff you. No one that hit me.
All right, so we have all our board. Number 5, 425 budget message.
So that's where I get to kind of say my piece. What I am not going to do is I am not going to read you the budget message that is in the book because you couldn't read. There's nothing more frustrating than to have someone read to you something that you have in front of you to read. So really, the thing that I want to, in essence, reiterate from the conversation and the budget message is that we're in an interesting time economically. If you've been in education or have been paying attention to education and budgets long enough, you'll know that in 2007, 2008, 2009, we had the Great Recession. There was a lot of budget cuts that happened at that time. School districts were back in Florence. They cut 50 people mid-year. They would get to finish the year. I personally was one of those reductions in force from the North Bend School District, the school principals. Bless you.
Thank you.
If you go farther back than that, you go back to in the economy after 9/11 happened, the economy took a nosedive. School districts had to tighten their belt, they cut budgets, there were a lot of layoffs and things associated with that. What's different now is that our economy is not taking a nosedive. Our economy is robust. And yet, we are creating and presenting a budget to you that is one in which we're appreciative that we can bring a balanced budget before you. We're appreciative we can do so and maintain the 7% ending fund balance in our new budget. But we are coming to you with a budget that in a time frame when we've lost ESSER funds, at a time frame when we're losing enrollment, our enrollment is declining, and so we have in this shifted our mindset from a mindset of surplus to a mindset of scarcity, right? And so all that means is we're being careful with this budget, and not that we weren't before, because fortunately our leadership and I'm standing right next to Tim, who helped guide us through those ESSER funds, in which a lot of districts really significantly overspent and overstaffed in ESSER funds that put them in a spot where if you know what's going on around the state, you'll see the Salems and the Portlands and the Bends and many districts that are presenting Ashland, presenting very dire budgets where they're making significant cuts. And because of the skill and the wisdom of our predecessors and Tim and his department, this district is not facing those kinds of cuts, and we're not sending that kind of a message out. But we are sending a message out that we need to be careful and we need to be diligent as we move forward with our staffing needs, because even at this time of a robust economy, we're seeing declining enrollment, and the declining enrollment outweighs benefits in the economy that we have right now. So as we walk through this, please understand that we're not presenting a fat budget to you. We're presenting a careful budget to you, a belt tightening budget to you. And I just want to say I do appreciate the work of Tim and the department to make that happen. There's been a lot of wisdom in the past, and there's hopefully a lot of wisdom in this budget. We are, quite frankly, we have a budget before you that we hope to underspend by a lot, so that we can positively impact our ending fund balance a year from now as we look to next year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim and our capable department to start walking through the details with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. So I'm Tim Kreider, the assistant superintendent, and have been the director of the finance department and human resources department, and still oversee both of those departments in this new role this school year. I'm joined here by Anna Bergmeyer, our business service specialist, and Lorraine Sullivan, our finance controller, who as a group have put countless hours into developing this budget. It is a complex process. We follow what's called the Program Budgeting and Accounting Manual, the PBAM from Oregon Department of Education. We build the budget in alignment with state standards and the budget parameters set forth by ODE and the different grants we receive in order to meet all these requirements and propose a budget to you that you can consider and potentially approve, which will be at the fund and function level. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we dive into the actual budget document. We do have a presentation that kind of gives you a big, just kind of overarching view of what's in this binder. Because this just flipping through these pages can be a little overwhelming if it's not something that you're used to looking at. So, Matt, if you don't mind presenting that, you want me to fix that? I can see what.
Yeah, I was gonna let you get to it, so, but yeah, my screen will start.
Does that help?
Yeah.
There we go. That's what we do, we solve problems. So we have, let's see here, just kind of start going through here, an overview of all district funds. So here you can see this is a combination of our general fund, our special revenues fund. The general fund is mainly comprised of state school fund dollars. The special revenues are generally grant dollars. There's a tiny bit of debt service in there, and then there's capital improvement funds. Overall, the entire proposed budget for 24-25 is $63,847,000 $47,405. You can see the 23-24 adopted budget was $62.6 million. So we're seeing an increase in the overarching budget, the everything combined, of about 1.84%. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about where that increase is coming from, because we hear the words declining enrollment, and yet you're looking at an increase here. So I'll kind of dive into that as we're going through these pages. And one thing that I'll say multiple times is that when we adopted the budget in 23-24, the state had originally allocated $9.9 billion to education. And we built a budget and adopted it at that $9.9 billion allocation. The state then came back and said, we're actually going to give you $10.2 billion. We didn't adjust our budget. We didn't seek the appropriation authority to spend that additional fund, the additional revenue, because we were looking into the future. And that's a big thing we do when we're building these budgets and working in this world, is we kind of have to work in the reality of the past, the current cycle of the budget, and we're always trying to predict the future and see where we're going to go. And we knew that ESSER dollars were ending. We saw the birth rates going down in Oregon. We knew we were losing students. These are all messages you've been hearing over the past few years. So when that 10.2 billion came to us, we said, let's don't touch it. Let's just leave it there, because then it becomes part of your beginning fund balance the next year. So what we did is we took that difference and built it into this budget as a beginning fund balance to help carry us through next year without facing all the layoffs that you see going on around the state. So that's a big part of where this extra increase is coming from. And the other part of it is when the state adopts a budget, it's on a biennium, a 2-year process, a 2-year term, and they do what's called a 49-51% split. When they said you're going to get, the 10.2 billion. In year 1 of the biennium, you get 49% of your allocation. In year 2, 51%, with the idea that you'll have some roll-up costs. Roll-up costs, depending on your budget, may or may not actually meet your requirements. So in the proposed budget, we have sort of just a breakdown here that's got a little choppy there in this presentation. We have the general fund makes up about 71% of our total budget. Special revenue, again, general fund is primarily state school fund related. So state school fund property taxes. Special revenue funds, primarily they're grant monies, and then we have 400s on here, which are the capital projects of about 3%. So construction type projects, improvements, things like that. And then there's a small one here, a little sliver you can't really see, which is debt service, and that's less than 1%. Some significant changes from last year's or this current year's budget to what we're proposing. We are continuing to see declining enrollment. So that means less funding, because the allocation breaks down by, a certain amount per student. We are seeing increased operational costs. Utilities have gone up tremendously. Our transportation costs had been under budgeted and have gone up. So there's a large increase in here for transportation costs. We also have things, like the COLA increases. Oh, that's not at the bottom, but we had a long-term care and treatment program. So that was a grant funded program that ran, you may have known it as Kairos. And we had, it was a day treatment program that was within our schools and it was grant funded through the state. And that program is ending as of the end of this year within our school district. Kairos will continue to function as their own entity, but that's not in this budget any longer. We had 6 teachers funded from ESSER $3, so that grant ends September 30th. So there is a small portion of ESSER dollars built into here, which is the carryover from the end of June into July, August, and September, so we can continue to spend that down because officially it ends 9/30. We want to, and we do have a plan to spend that down as well. We have some new grants in here. A Stronger Connections grant, which you've heard about very recently, was added to our budget. We had received the Stronger Connections funding. That's the one we talked about utilizing to fund an extra SRO for the district, for example, which was a big priority of many. We have an early literacy grant built into this budget, which is also a new grant. Early literacy allows us to hire some instructional coaching support for our teachers in K3 to help improve outcomes. And many of our metrics are based around that third grade reading, benchmark. And so this is something that really help improves that. We built in, it's called the COPS grant, and I'm actually in the process of putting that together right now. And we put it in here. It doesn't mean we'll get it. But if we do get it, we wanted to have the appropriation authority to spend it. So if we don't get it, we don't spend it. And then COLA increases, our cost of living increases for our staff members. We've over the past few years, it's typically kind of been this pattern of 4%, 4%, 4%. So we're building that in here again too. Some assumptions used to create the budget, state school funding. Again, we're in the second year of the biennium. So it's the 51% split of the 10.2 billion. So now we're building the budget on the full 10.2 billion at 51% of that split. We have continued declining enrollment. So we've factored that into this budget. And our support functions in the general fund have increased. Utilities, again, a very large increase. Student transportation also an increase. So now we're kind of breaking away from the whole budget into just the general fund. So our general fund is really primarily funded by the state school fund. And when we get into the budget document and towards the end, you'll see there's a printout of what the state school fund formula looks like. It's really the largest portion of our budget. It could be used for all of our operating costs. It's composed of property taxes, local revenues. It does include our estimated beginning fund balance. So again, we're kind of like live in our 23-24 budget. We don't quite know what we can predict where we're going to end, but so we think we got our finger on that. So that we build that into our beginning fund balance for the next school year, and that's included in the general fund as well. And you'll also see the contingencies in there, the ending fund balance. And overall, the general fund has increased by about 867,000. And this is where you can really start to see where that declining enrollment's affecting us, because if you think about us adopting a budget at the 9.9 billion and not including the 10.2, now we are including the 10.2 and the higher percentage of it, only seeing an increase of 867,000 in the general fund is not very much when you talk about all those roll-up costs, employees stepping and COLA increases, right there, a step is, about 3%, 3.5%, somewhere in between. And then you got your 4% COLA. So that's a lot. Those just those roll-up costs and employees is a lot. You have your associated payroll costs that go up, again, you have your utility bills and your transportation going up. So that's one of the challenges here we're facing in this one. Enrollment wise, We broke apart here, North Bend School District and Evergreen EVA is Evergreen Virtual Academy. It used to be Oregon Virtual Academy. Evergreen is a charter academy that we sponsor. And essentially their money from the state flows through our district and onto them. So we have to, and there's a lot of different things we do. As far as just ensuring compliance, they're fantastic on their own, but we are responsible ultimately to make sure they're following state guidelines. So they're also in this budget too. And a lot of times when we see large decreases, it's because of Evergreen's declining enrollment as well. Over the past few years. So North Bend School District, we built this budget. We give ODE our estimates in December for the next school year. So again, we're really trying to predict pretty far out what our enrollment's going to be. It all gets fixed later, reconciled later, based on your actuals, but not usually until the next school year. So 23-24, in September, we were about 2,079 students. We're lower than that right now. We're building this budget on a projected number of 2,001. So again, a decrease there of about 78 students from our September enrollment. And we had built the budget on higher than that number. So you think every 100 student, it's about 10,500 per student. So, every 100 kids is a lot of money. It's over $1 million. So then Evergreen, they're projected to go up. They gave us numbers. They think they've stabilized. A few years ago, they shot through the roof during the COVID pandemic when schools kind of shut down, and a lot of people just started enrolling their kids in virtual charter schools, and their enrollment went up over 3,000, and it's just been declining ever since. This year, it appears as if they've stabilized a bit. They predicted an enrollment of about 950 to start the school year. So we built the budget with that in mind. Here you can kind of see the enrollment trend for our brick and mortar schools here, our schools here in North Bend over the years. And again, you think every one of these lines here on this chart is over $1 million, that we're losing in funding. When we hit the pandemic, we were in a point when our reserves had been growing a little bit, and then we received the ESSER funding. So we really focused on maintaining all of our staffing at these higher numbers. And as the enrollment's been declining, we haven't done a whole lot of adjustment for that declining enrollment, because we wanted to purposely provide as much resources as we can to our students. It just now, we're at a point we do need to adjust a little bit, especially for the ESSER funding. Here you can see Evergreen Virtual Academy's enrollment trend. Like I said there, they had shot up over 3,000 at one point. We keep 6% of that state school funding. So again, like I talked about, the pass-through. So we sponsor them, ensure compliance with OD requirements, and then they send us the money as the sponsoring district. We pass through about 94% of that back to Evergreen, and then the district retains 6% as a revenue source. That has been a challenge in this declining enrollment situation over the past few years, because we've been building budgets on the higher numbers that they expected to keep. And so therefore we're budgeting and we're planning to have more revenue than we ever received the following year. So we've been in this constant adjustment cycle. And that money we keep just becomes part of our general fund and part of our operating costs. So we're happy to see them stabilize so that we can better plan for how to utilize those funds and not be impacted by the change in enrollment.
Have you ever interviewing somebody that was sitting at the lab?
That's part of the interview. I don't want any part of it.
Maybe in small.
Right.
Oh,
But that's happened too.
testing them out, see if they can handle it. Enrollment directly relates to the state school fund, again, 10.2 billion, the funding level. As we go into next school year, another challenge is trying to figure out what exactly is the state going to allocate to schools, for the next biennium. So one of the things we'll be adjusting for, as Vince talked about, is how do we make up sort of a gap that we're backfilling using some of our carryover funds, and plan to move into the next school year and not impact our staff too much. One of our goals has consistently been to avoid, laying off people if we can. These are community members and people serving our children, so we're trying to always plan for adjustments that are necessary through natural attrition. When people are retiring or taking other jobs elsewhere, we take advantage of those opportunities. The state school fund, like I said, it's about 10,489 amount per student. And that's an increase of about 829. And that is the allocation per individual student, and then the weights are added on to them depending on their needs, which could increase that allocation per student. Essentially, you could have, if a student is in special education, they count as one additional weight. So a special education student actually counts as 2. It would be the 21,000 about you'd be receiving. A student in this poverty situation counts for an extra quarter of a weight. So there's these different weighting formulas that come into play too, because it's recognized that it often costs more to provide the services students need in these types of situations. When we broke apart the state school fund, we see that the amount in the end that North Bend receives from the state school fund is an increase of about $625. That's a result of the money per student going up from where it was. I think it was maybe 9,400 when we built this 9,600. Yeah, 9,600 when we built the budget for this current year. Now it's 10,489. So you see a big portion of that decrease from the state school fund is because of Evergreen. And then we saw a little bit of an increase there in the state school fund. So I was really talking about the revenue, so the money coming in. And so when we're now going to kind of switch over to the expenditure side of it. So when we're building the budget, of course, we want our revenues and expenditures to match. We have this broken into a couple different ways in this budget binder. As a budget committee, you're really appropriating by the fund and the function level, but this does get into the object level too. So you can see where the different funds are going. When we talk about function, it's really the activities grouped together by the services they perform. So you see, this is looking at the budget from instruction or support services. Instruction, anything tied directly to the instruction of students. So it could include the salaries of the teachers, and it does include the salaries of the teachers, benefits, materials. And the charter school is also included. Evergreen's also included in that instruction function. Support services are more the things that enhance instruction. So administrative costs, administrative salaries, technical costs, personnel such as guidance and health, healthcare, nurses, health aides, things like that, logistical support. Other in this function pie chart is really the main part of this is really debt service and contingency. Transportation as well is in support services. Where are you at?
Oh, I was just saying what the 11% makes up, it's contingencies and transfers.
Transfers, yes, okay. Excellent. So here you can see the adopted 23-24 and the 24-25 comparison. And No doubt the first thing that you're looking at are those parentheses around instruction at the end there, right? A decrease of 2.4 million is being budgeted to instruction. Remember, Evergreen is included in that function. So the state school fund for all those kids comes to us, we retain 6% of it and the rest goes out. Their enrollment goes down. That greatly affects this function. And so that's why you're seeing that decrease there. That is the primary reason you're seeing that decrease right there. Support services you're seeing go up, and that really is a combination again of utilities and transportation costs is the main chunk of those support service increases. And there are the roll-up costs associated with people grouped into that category. I'll kind of skip down here a little bit. The debt service and transfers, debt services really are. Some computer leases are in there, and the transfers are funds transferred from the general fund that go into things like building a textbook reserve, because we have to adopt textbooks on the cycle. You know, that's outlined by the state requirements. We want, you know, to have modern and, you know, upgraded materials for our students. So in order to keep up with those adoption cycles, you have to have money for them. And so you have to budget for that. So we kind of try to build a long-term plan of when we're going to do adoptions and how much money we estimate. So that's money that we transfer a little bit. So that way it doesn't hit our budget all at once. You would see transfers for the tech reserve fund as well. We need to do a tech replacement fund, and you can't just say, well, this is the year we're going to replace, you know, 1,000 student laptops. You have to do them slowly, and you have to budget accordingly. Same thing with our smart boards that are in classrooms. And so that's by transferring a little bit of money every year into that, we can always ensure that we have a plan to carry that process out. You know, we try to plan, you know, 8 to 10 years in advance. So that's what those transfers really are. There's smaller amounts like for the athletic band reserve, you know, again, athletics, they get very little of the budget. And so those vans don't last forever. Maintenance vans don't last forever. So there's a little bit of money going into that. So every few years we can replace one of our old vans. And contingency, you're seeing the increase there. And the contingency is we keep saying 7% as our ending fund balance. And really from years ago, we started with this with a board resolution, and then the board recently adopted the policy. It's not truly 7% of the whole thing. It's 2% of it's a 5 and a 2. So think 5% of all operating revenues is our ending fund balance, and not our ending fund balance. Well, I guess it is our ending fund balance contingency. That the ending fund balance is made up of 5% of all funds. And then there's a 2% economic stability of just the general fund. So we say 7 because 5 and 2 is 7. But when you really think about it, your 5% is all funds, which includes the general fund. And then you do the economic stability of just the general fund. So in this budget, it looks like it's about 9% of the general fund. So I can show you that a little bit more. Go through here.
How come it went up?
It didn't,
Contingency.
because it was a lower amount. That was kind of spread into some different areas, and we want to have it all together in one spot because it's more transparent that way. To just see contingencies and know that is your 5 and 2%. By being in a contingency, if we needed to access it, we could. If we put it in an unappropriated ending fund balance, we couldn't. It would be really hard to access that if we had an emergency situation without doing all this again.
So are you saying your contingency is really where you're hoping to end up at the end of the year?
Yeah. When we get into object is really the service or commodity purchase. So when you look at your budget document, the functions and the objects, they match the number, the end result. It's just different levels of categorizing. It's a different sort of perspective of looking at the funds, and it's part of the accounting structure outlined in that program budgeting accounting manual. So when we get into objects, you know, you break it down into things like salaries, benefits, purchase services. So salaries obviously exist in all the functions. You know, you're going to have salaries in the instruction function, you're going to have salaries in the support service function. But when you look at it by object, you can look at it by just salaries altogether. So we can see we spend about, or we're budgeting about 31% of our general fund on salaries, another 21% ends up being benefits. Purchase services is where you're seeing the charter school again. So that's a big portion of that. So in the function level, the charter school is existing in instruction. On the object level, it's existing in purchase services. Same amounts. It's just, it looks like a big chunk of this. So it's sort of just like another dimension of looking at our budget. Let's see here. So here we have the comparison, 23-24 adopted, and then 24-25 proposed. So you can see the increase in salaries, increase in benefits, essentially roll-up costs, again, steps, COLAs. Purchase services, you see that decrease of 2.8. That is evergreen. Supplies and materials up slightly, capital outlay down a little bit. And really that while that number is down a little bit there, we've increased 400s, which is our capital improvements. Debt services up slightly, transfers again, planning for those transfers ahead of time so that you're seeing those go up a little bit so we can have those things like textbook adoptions and you know, continue to build our IT infrastructure, and then the contingency again as well. So here you can really get a grasp on how we're kind of weathering the financial storm. Our estimated beginning fund balance on July 1st, so rolling into this new budget that's proposed, we're estimating at 6.6 million. And then by the end of the year, an ending fund balance of 4.1, so those contingencies. And we're using reserves of about 2.5 million. And that again is primarily a result of budgeting at the state allocation of 9.9 billion and not using those funds, not putting it in our budget, holding on to it as we rolled into next year's budget because we knew that we were going to need it and we didn't want to put ourselves in a bind. And you know, this is one of the first conversations I think Vince and I talked about when he sat down at my desk, and you know, we were talking about the budget, and I explained to him that yes, you know, we could go seek that you know, appropriation authority to spend it, but that's going to put us in a bad situation later. And we both agreed that we preferred to be cautious moving into this next budget cycle. The estimated ending fund balance, that's where you're seeing it show up as 9% of the general fund. That's because we take the whole thing and put it in the general fund. So ending fund balance, 5% of all revenue, including your special revenue funds. But then when you put that into your general fund, you know, it looks like it's a little bit more than 5% because that's a smaller fund than everything. And then there's 2% of the economic stability is 2% of just the general fund. And that one is economic stability that's in place in case the state school fund were to go down by a certain percentage. We could tap into that to help get through the school year without doing layoffs mid-year, as the reason that exists. So we're using some reserves, quite a bit of reserves, to balance the budget. We've already started preparing for some of these things. Even last summer, we were preparing, when we had, we were actually doing this the year before when I had taken on the two roles of the, business director and the HR director, and not bringing in another director to cut some costs out. We recognize the need to put some resources back in our schools. So some of the coaching positions, instructional coaching positions that existed within the district office, when those positions were hired, when those individuals were hired into the school setting, we didn't replace them in the district office because we wanted to reduce our expenses. Again, trying to prepare for this. So we've really done a lot of this with a lot of foresight. You're kind of, again, living in all these different worlds. You got your actuals from your previous years after they're audited. You're trying to work through your current year and estimate where you're going with the current year. And then you got your crystal ball trying to look into the next school year. And so the reserve history, everything up until 22-23s were actuals. Those are audited numbers. And then when you get into 23-24, it's an estimate. Again, you're seeing that large increase there in that reserve because the budget was built at 9.9 and the state gave us 10.2. So we're kind of tucking that away for this, and we're on the 51% split, so the higher percentage of that. And next year, the estimate is at 4.1, which is the contingency you see elsewhere for the ending fund balance. And again, that's our estimate. As we go through the year, as we're working through the year, we plan on being very cognizant of the decisions we're making and of when we fill positions or when we shouldn't fill positions, and how can we be creative about using our current staff to meet the needs of students without getting ourselves into a situation where we're saying, wow, now we need to lay off a whole bunch of people, because we don't want to do that. And we won't. I fully believe we won't be in that situation. Okay, I'm going to jump over into grants a bit. So some of the highlighted grants. So these are all living in your special revenues, your 200 funds, the Stronger Connections, Student Investment Account, High School Success, and ESSER 3. So Stronger Connections grant is a 2-year grant. So again, we're talking about supporting a second school resource officer with that. And in partnership with the police department, really, and when we put this grant together, the purpose is really to be someone there that's also teaching the kids, really trying to instruct them on, drug prevention strategies, working through problems, bullying prevention, and being a positive influence on the students. Because a lot of times we do see that a lot of our students are in situations where unfortunately their exposure to police officers is often negative. And when we see the work that happens with our police officers in our schools, it's just so positive. And so these kids really learn that these are really positive people, and they really do make a difference, and they're a safe person that they can go to. So we have the suicide and bully prevention built into that, some training on that. We talked using a portion of that to see if Coos Health and Wellness could potentially add some more counseling services. We currently contract with them, and we would like to add a little bit more if possible. We talked about adding some security supplies and upgrades, community engagement opportunities. We were really hoping we could bring together some different situations where we can just bring the community in and show them all the great things happening in our schools, really make people a little bit more involved with what is happening, and some additional support for 8th and 9th grade on track to graduate.
Is that just starting the 2-year, or are we into it already 1 year, or?
Stronger Connections would start next year. It's new to the 24-25 budget.
Will that happen again in 2 years? Or we don't know?
We don't know. It'll be a 2-year grant for sure. What it does do is it provides us with an opportunity of seeing if these things help and if they work, And if the grant doesn't continue, it provides us 2 years to figure out a way to build it into our general fund. Yeah. If these continue to be priorities, which I imagine they would. Student Success Act funds the student investment account, and that's designed primarily to meet students' mental and behavioral health needs, increase academic achievement, reduce disparities in our schools. The 4 main allowable investments with the student investment account are class size reductions, well-rounded education, instructional time, and increasing health and safety of students. Currently, the student investment account funds about 16 FTE full-time employee is the total number. And that's about $2.2 million. And this is projected to, this is we see this as a consistent revenue source. We don't see this going away. It might go down a little bit depending on enrollment, but not right now. Right now, it's actually gone up. And so we're funding behavioral health consultants, which are part of our behavioral programs at the elementary level and middle school level, social emotional learning staff, K2 class size reduction, certified teachers. We have outdoor education funded through that at the middle school level, alternative ed staff, so some staff from Bridges, and teacher mentoring stipends are going to be built into that for next school year. Some additional things we're funding from there are the middle school, high school licensed school therapists through Coos Health and Wellness. We partner again with them to provide some therapists at a significantly reduced cost if we went out and hired them ourselves. Social emotional learning, professional development opportunities, extended day opportunities, summer school, academic tutoring, safety and security upgrades, a little bit of money is put aside for textbooks, adoptions, learning connectivity, so tech supplies, and there is 5% administrative fee that we charge to that. High school success. High school success grant came through Measure 98 when the grant first appeared in our district. We built our construction trade center with it. So that's our CTE program over there that is just fantastic for kids to have exposure to. So right now, these are in 2-year grant cycles, but they're expected to be continuous revenue sources. We have 2 graduation coaches funded through that. The teacher on TOSA is a teacher on special assignment. That is the dean of Bridges, the alternative ed program. At the high school, we have 1 certified teacher for Bridges through High School Success and 2 CTE teachers planned for next year at a High School Success. Again, ESSER 3 funding ends 9/30/24. We have an estimated remaining of about $315,000 as of July 1st. So that's money that we're carrying over, building into this budget so we can continue to spend it. I brought multiple projects, to the board to allow us opportunities to create spend down plans. It doesn't mean they're all funded out of ESSER. It just allowed us the ability to fund it out of ESSER. This $315,000 remaining, large majority of it will be funding the high school restroom project where they're rebuilding those restrooms, creating some more single-use restrooms that are ADA accessible, a lot safer. And that was a project again necessitated because we had some leaking sewage pipes. So this is a great opportunity to take advantage of these ESSER dollars and put something in place that'll benefit students and a staff bathroom too. Smaller expenses are built into this that we could use. We had some esports upgrades to that program. We had possibility of some vape sensor costs. Most likely those will be coming out of some SIA carryover instead. And then we are building in, we currently have mentoring stipends in them. Again, trying to move that over to SIA because that's a continuous funding source. But there are things that we could fund out of here if we don't use up the whole 315 in the capital projects, bathroom project. That's a quick overview. That's just the general overview of this whole binder. And I thought that would go a lot faster. So. My next plan was to kind of walk you through the binder. But I want to check the committee's, time expectations. Typically what we would do is kind of get familiar with the structure of the binder. Answer any questions about how this is put together just on the kind of more structural level of the binder itself. If you have individual questions, like things you want to delve deeper into, it's appropriate for you to reach out directly. As a budget committee, though, we're following public meeting law, so you wouldn't want to gather together and talk about it as a committee, but you could reach out individually. Any questions you have, we would try to answer, and we will also answer in the next budget committee meeting so that everybody can hear those answers as well. There's also an email address that the public can send questions to, which is posted on our website. And we'll be checking that, and any questions that go into that we'll also bring to the committee to make sure that everybody hears those answers.
Can you share this presentation with the board?
100%.
Thanks.
Yeah, the budget committee, yes, absolutely. And did we bring the copies of it? Did they
Yeah,
get it?
we did. Bring
We have paper copies too, but I'll be sure to email that out as well. Everybody feel good jumping into the binder, walking through it real quick? Okay. So again, because the binder goes into function and object level, you'll see a lot of the recurring themes that I just covered. Because basically the main things that stick out in here when you look through it, or those big changes, are all things that we tried to make sure we covered in these presentations. So we have that overview and understanding of that. Kind of as you just get a table of contents, organizational section, we get into just the budget committee. We have the budget adoption calendar for the 24-25 budget. The district budget message for 24-25, starting on page 9, that was Vince covered that. That's the superintendent's message that was delivered. Page 12 and 13 really get into the budget format and process that we use when we're kind of breaking down the budget and trying to build it. This continues into page 14 and 15. So you again, budget process is outlined, the budget adoption is outlined, the concept of a supplemental budget is explained to you there if we ever needed to do that. We have the numbers you see on page 15, all funds, again, all of this correlates to what I just presented to you in the general fund as well. So you see 20, your pie charts there showing you a comparison 23-24 to 24-25. And again, you see things like instruction decreasing because of Evergreen. So as you're flipping through this, when you see those large decreases, either in instruction or purchase services, know that it's always Evergreen is the primary driver behind that. We look at the enrollment on page 16, enrollment trends, and then we talk about the fund balance, which is that, and it kind of discusses the concept of the 5% of total operating revenues and also the economic stabilization, 2% of general fund adopted revenues. On those pie charts on page 16, again, that's the object level. So when you look at purchase services, you're seeing 23-24. Purchase services at 41% drop down to 34%, and that is because of the Evergreen drop in enrollment. That was budgeted for 23-24, because when we built that budget, we thought they'd be higher than they even are. Some
question.
Yeah.
What is enrollment at today?
the enrollment for
For the district.
that for our district. Oh, gosh, I'd have to pull up the enrollment report.
I don't have my phone on me, but we did just get it.
I did.
Yeah.
I took a quick look on.
We'll grab that number for you. Yeah. And that's, the enrollment is something that we're constantly monitoring. And we always include a monthly update in the board, meeting packet too, so that we can all kind of keep an eye on that. Yeah, so page 17 kind of gets into that. You got your PERS costs explained, and then the budgeting changes, and then the student enrollment comparison to FTE.
Our combined enrollment right now, we have software that we use that kind of pulls it all together daily. And we have 2946 if I filter it specifically for the 4 brick and mortar schools. As of this moment, 2016. And as you can, as Tim already presented, we're building this budget based on 2001 brick and mortar students for next year.
And if we're wrong, the state reconciles. They'll do a preliminary reconciliation at the end of the current school year, and then they do a final one at the end of the next school year too, based on the actuals from the previous. So we try to get that as close as we possibly can, because it keeps us from having this up and down, but there's always they call it the May surprise, you know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We want to be as close as we can.
And probably should mention too, that what we're talking about is what we call ADMR. It's the real number of students who are in the seats. But as Tim mentioned earlier, we talked about like special ed students get weighted twice. The second number, that the actual payment to us in state school support, is in the ADMW. And that W stands for the weighted. And so, you know, we build our budget based on, well, our enrollment estimates is obviously ADMR, but when it comes down to the actual amount, so if you were to take 2001 and multiply it by $10,500 a student, you would end up with less than we're actually budgeting for. Okay, because of the difference between the real ADM and what the weighted.
While you were explaining that, I was taking an opportunity to check in with my esteemed colleagues here. I should have sat in the middle,
Well,
my left and my right hand. You know, I can't do anything without them, so fantastic. When you look at the staffing, the student enrollment compared to FTE, one thing I'll point out there is, so you certified, think teachers, classified staff, you know, those a lot of support staff. We got maintenance, food service, all of our educational assistants. When you look at confidential, those are your business office, HR, board secretary, administrative assistant, the superintendent. And it looks like we increased by 1. We didn't actually increase by 1. It says 9.5 to 10.5. What happened was we had somebody in the administrator budget code that we moved into confidential. So when you see 13 administrators for 23-24, by taking the person out and moving them to confidential, that would have gone down to 12. But then we did add an administrator, a vice principal of the elementary school. And then we added a 0.5 special education administrator. So there was no additional confidential staff added. It was actually correcting where somebody should have been budgeted into that confidential category. Strategic planning is outlined there. We do have strategic planning services in this budget because that is something that we intend to engage in fully next school year. So we included those costs in here. This talks about some challenges. And then page 19 kind of gets into the student investment account again, into other district funds, which the special revenues, debt service, and capital projects fund. Page 20 takes you into the department narratives. So all the administrators in charge of the different departments take a look at this section, and they talk about their outcomes for 23-24 and their goals and objectives for 24-25. So you'll see that kind of, you got central support services, facilities and maintenance, curriculum instruction. And it'll go all the way through federal programs, food service, human resources, special education, and then it'll get into the schools. Page 25, you start talking about the school budget narratives. And a new addition to this year is that we included the enrollment trends for just the school itself. So you could kind of dig into that a little bit more, and if you have questions, let us know. And those are all enrollments as of September 30th. So not enrollments as of the end of the year, but as of September 30th of each year. And you'll see that continues through Hillcrest Elementary, middle school, and the high school. Page 30 talks about some of those budget assumptions that I explained in the PowerPoint presentation. We talk about the extended ADMW general purpose grant per ADM. So that went from, like we said earlier, $9,660 up to $10,489 per student. So ADM stands for average daily membership. State school fund budgeted at 10.2 billion from the state. That's the state allocation, obviously not what we're receiving. 49-51 split. Our share of the state school fund is there. The transportation revenue. So when we budget for transportation costs, the 70%, well, not all of the transportation costs are reimbursable, but most of them are, and we get about 70% of those costs back later. And so that's part of our revenue too. Property taxes and local revenue is in there. The beginning general fund balance is added, and that's the 6.6 million. And then our contingency is our planned ending fund balance for the end of next school year. And that is the 5% and the 2%. You can see student enrollment trends as of September 30th for the school district and for the charter school. Kind of just look at that. We have a lot enrollment broken down here multiple ways. So just again, lots of perspectives to think about. On page 32, you can see by grade level, for each year going back to 14-15. And they're estimated those are as of September 30th as well. And then next year, of course, is estimated. And then on page 33, again, you see another view of that broken down by school and the potential teacher count and the class size per teacher if we had that. And it's important to note here that we don't necessarily need to fill all these positions. It depends on how many kids enroll above and beyond what we're estimating, but we're building in the capacity to have this many teachers. 2023-24 actuals in there, same chart, different year. Then it gets into the district account structure. And then 36 talks about, page 36 talks about the function allocations versus 37, which is the object allocations. Next tab, we get into the financial section. And 41 is a proposed budget. And it goes from revenue of all funds, which is the top green line, revenue, all funds, and it goes general fund, special revenue, debt service, capital projects, and your grand total of 63.8 million. And then the expenditure is broken apart by function and then again by object. So again, your grand total for functions and objects matching. Because again, just different dimensions of looking at the same budget. And there's no doubt you'll have questions as you look into this, so I encourage you to look at this, feed us those questions before the next meeting, so we can, try to answer those questions for you and bring them back, because if you have the question, so will other community members and budget committee members. Page 42, you get into the history of adopted budgets, so you can kind of compare what was adopted each year to what we're proposing. And see where the significant changes are from the adopted budget for 23-24 to 24-25. Things like, let's see here, something like you might see something show up or go away, like on general fund resources, 4,000 federal source. We included federal forest fees. Anticipated 16,000, not a large amount, but just something we wanted to make sure was built in there. If you go down to other fund resources and requirements, you see on number 294, long-term care and treatment, that was the Kairos program. So you see 3 years there of budgeted expenses, requirements, and then it goes away. It just blanked out because we don't have that next year. So that's why that one's gone there.
Tim, I might also add, if you take a look back at the budget in 2021-22, and you see that the general fund had $58 million, and then another almost $22 million in the other funds and special resources. Just remember that if you look back at the Evergreen enrollment in 21-22, in the midst of COVID, I think that's when they had 3,000 students. And so again, most of that in that era, as you compare them, are going to be the flow through dollars that happened, that just essentially went straight through it. And then ESSER funds, we had started seeing the flow from the federal government through the state, and ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, as well as then ESSER 3. And so there was a point where all three of those we were experiencing the benefits of, and so our funding and the other funds and resource requirements, special funds, was higher than too. So just to have that context of taking a look at the last few years.
Thank you. And then when you look at 42 as well, other fund resources requirements. So 200 says federal state programs. That's a large chunk there. That's a compilation of multiple grants. So that includes early literacy, tribal attendance, promising practices, stronger connections, the ESSER 3 carryover, title funds. So it's a combination of multiple grants there. On page 43, you're getting in proposed budget, all funds.
Can I
Yep.
interrupt again?
Yep.
Julie, you had mentioned, trying to remember fairly recently about the corporate activity tax and where that plays in. If you look at our SIA 60, all of the dollars that we get from the corporate activity tax are right there. So that is our fund 260 student investment SIA. Okay. On page 42, back up on 42, and then on the left, on the other fund resource requirements, down to 260.
260 student investment SIA.
Corporate activity tax is that one.
Yeah.
Okay,
So when you ask what we get from that, that's what it was.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
In the proposed budget amount, it includes a carryover amount from this year into next. So it's next year's allocation plus funds that were unspent 23-24 that will carry into 24-25 to start the year off. So which is why it's higher than actually what our allocation is. 24, so next page is just it's a comparison of 24-25 to 23-24. Also broken down by fund and object function, yeah. Next page is another new one we added, 44 talks, it just shows you the proposed budget and the FTE associated with that part of the budget. So FTE, like 220 doesn't necessarily mean there's 220 individuals, it's, you take all their hours and combine them together, it's 220 full-time equivalents. Moving into the general fund. Again, page 46, just kind of showing you the graph, the pie chart view of that. Getting into 47, you're seeing the different years compared. So we got the revenue source and the history. Local sources, state sources, interfund transfers, beginning fund balance. So again, local sources, think property taxes. State school fund, state sources. General fund object history, you can see the different trends there. Function history on page 48. That first set in instruction, again, Evergreen's included in this area, so you can see kind of that we've been having a hard time pinpointing exactly where they're going to be in enrollment when we create these budgets. So it was up, then it did go down, then they projected a higher enrollment than they actually had. So we had that 23-24 higher than it should have been. And so now 24-25 we're predicting to stabilize, which is why it jumps back down. When you start getting down to 49, you're getting down into a comparison year to year where you actually have actuals compared to the current year's adopted budget and next year's proposed budget. So we really made an effort this year to kind of go through those actuals and really adjust everything based on the actuals, the adopted budget, and what the expected expenses are for the remainder of this year to create a proposed budget that better fits actual expenditures. And then on the last column there, you can see the actual increase or decrease from the prior year budget. So again, this is an area where you see the charter school actually outlined. 100 general, and then it goes to 1288 charter school. You can see a decrease of $3.5 million. So as you're kind of browsing through that, if there's things that jump out at you or areas of interest and you would like more information on that, that's where we would love to have those questions.
So Tim, on the charter school, because that was a question I had in my mind was, if I want to know, out of the 63.8 million, how much is North Bend brick and mortar? How much is EVA? Is this the number for EVA right here?
This is the number we're projecting to pay them.
So, yeah.
Yes,
Okay,
charge. Yeah.
Minus.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Hey, we've been at it an hour and 25 minutes. So should we have a 5-minute break or 7-minute break, then finish up, or what do you think?
That's on you, really.
Anybody
Whatever the
here?
committee wants.
Break? Let's go to a 7-minute break and then we'll wrap up. And
Sounds good.
we'll try to observe the Christina Simpson rule of 8 o'clock, running out the door in her honor.
Did we have?
All right. Shall we continue on?
We shall. Is Dallas coming?
Dallas, his, grandfather has been in Riverton the last 3 days, came back today, so he's exiting to go. There's not an emergency, but he's helping take care of his grandfather. So he's doing that. He will join us, again next week. And so that's what's up.
Okay, so I think we left off, we were looking at, were we on 49, 50? Okay, thank you. Some areas there that just to highlight, just because they would naturally draw a question, I think for me, like if I'm on page 49, looking at 1,000 instructional, and then if you keep going down into the 2000s, look at 2161 and 2190. So special ed direction, and then the next line 2190 is sped direction services. You could see, and this is a change in that program budgeting accounting manual from ODE that made us make this switch. So special ed director and administrative services had always been under 2161. And then we're now putting it under 2190. So you're seeing a shift there. So you did previous expenses stopped, you know, if you look at the actuals and adopted budget, then it's gone in 24-25. Then there was nothing in 2190, and now it's added to 24-25. So it's just shifting from one number to another. You also will see some things like 20 2321, I'm just gonna point this out, 2321 Office of the Superintendent. It looks like it took this huge increase, and really what happened there is, there's the superintendent, and then there's the administrative assistant, and then there's partial, office, front office secretary in the district office, just a small portion of that person's salary. And then I had been kind of all over the place in this budget, like pieces of me from different categories. I was in pieces in accounting, pieces in business services and HR. And now with the assistant superintendent position, now I'm just equally broke out, I believe, in 3 categories. So there's a third of me in office of the superintendent, and then a third of me in the business services, a third of me in human resources. So you'll see some areas kind of went down, and then like you'll see an area like the office superintendent jumped up because that third of me got added to that. That wasn't. Office of the Principal Services, the last line item there went up. We added the vice principal. So. And of course, steps, COLA increases, things like that. Jumping on to page 50. Where did we put that unemployment? Was it in payroll services?
It's gonna be under objects. Yeah, we can see it under objects versus functions.
Okay. Again, you can see in transportation's broken into a few areas, but here on, you can see the 2552, an increase in some transportation costs there. Kind of jumping down, I'm going to jump into page 51. We're getting into the object summary. So again, total dollar amounts matching your functions, but now just looking at it from a different dimension. And you can see the adopted budget from the proposed general fund object summary proposed budget 24-25. And then on page 52, the charter school function was taken out of that. So you can really get a kind of a glimpse of, if we take the charter completely out of the picture, what is our breakdown as a district? And then page 53 gets into object level general fund expenditures by object, where we were looking at the actuals for 21, 22, 22, 23. Those were audited numbers, and then our current adopted budget, and then our proposed budget. So again, a different sort of dimension, different way of looking at this. And
Over here.
yeah, unemployment, I wanted to add unemployment compensation. So on page 53, I'm looking at 232 unemployment compensation. There's the new law passed in Oregon where the classified staff members can apply for unemployment during the summer months. There's a lot of formulas involved with estimating how much it will cost us, but it's also guessing how many people will apply for it. And we really, we went through this multiple times. I mean, we could see this go as high as 500,000. We anticipate it maybe being hopefully around the 175. But this is a new cost for school districts based on these new laws. So it's going to take a few years to really get our finger on where this is, how much this is really going to cost. And once it starts, if it keeps going, we could also see that cost increasing as people learn how they can do this. That's why that jumps so much. So I'll kind of just keep flipping through there. Again, like I said, I know you'll have questions. Page 54, you can just jump right down to the charter school on 360. You see the large decrease again there. And I'm going on to page 55.
Tim, before you do.
Yep.
We took note of if you look at 385 on page 54. Management services,
Oh, yeah.
you'll see that it has a 900% jump. That's our strategic plan. That's where that's gonna be parked. So we've set $45,000 aside to hire our firm to help us through that strategic plan. So if you look at that and go, why is there such a big jump? What's that all about? It's because we're putting that into this year's budget.
And 55, as I'm kind of scrolling through here, you see decreases in a lot of areas. Computer software jumped up by 470 by about 77,000. Again, software costs increase. We also added in quite a few software programs associated with athletics, just to give people different ways of accessing the games and different systems that just help athletic director run those programs, which ultimately benefit our students. This current year, they weren't really built into that software budget. And then as you're kind of ending this page on page 55, you get into the contingency again. And then we go into another round of general fund. So here we're getting into, again, actuals, adopted, and proposed. And we've kind of rolled things together in this. So you can see the revenues on page 58. And then when we get down into 59, we're looking at general fund requirements and the proposed budget. These pages are a little bit tricky to look at. So if I just start with elementary K6 total, go to the green line, the first kind of light green line. 1111 elementary K6 total. That's the total of the lines above it. So your eyes will probably get lost in there a few times, but think the green line is the lines above it that feed into that. And then including in this budget, and this is new here, you're seeing the FTE associated with those programs. So you can see the staffing levels from the 23-24 adopted budget to the 24-25 proposed budget. So it just kind of gives you a nice little breakdown of all the different programs and the funding going into those, elementary, middle schools, high school programs, high school extracurricular. Charter school again is in there, just as one line item. English as a second language. You can see the funding and the amount of FTE budgeted to associate with that program. Support services, guidance services. So again, take some time to walk through here, see if any questions pop out, things that you're interested in.
What is the county school fund?
Oh, the county school fund.
It's in the 1,000 local source.
Yeah.
We get that via property tax. From the property tax. Common school fund comes from the state in their estimate. But county comes from the property tax.
Okay.
I'm going to jump into the special revenue funds. So these are the 200 to 299. And this is again where you're going to see revenue sources coming from local, state, federal, primarily grants. So flipping into page 70 and onward, you will see kind of where those funds are actually being used and for the staff associated with them.
What's the the increase in the Indian education? It's a really big increase.
Which number are you on?
R 4311 under 3000. Indian education,
State source, Indian Ed.
it goes from 21.5 to 173. On page 70.
Yep, I see it. Um. We'll give you an actual answer rather than
Yeah,
guess.
yes. Yeah, I think it's stronger connections. There's a federal grant that we're planning on cops.
Yeah. Wouldn't have been in there. We'll find out exactly what the increase is.
Okay.
That's
Just because it's so significant.
yeah, yeah. Did we move tribal attendance into that? I think it's tribal attendance, promising practices.
But it's from here to here, there's the increase though, not from here to here, so. It's not the change this year, it's a change.
Right, the change was from the 22-23 actual to the 23-24 adopted budget. And then we've kept it at the higher proposed amount for the proposed. So we'll give you exactly what that is.
Okay, thank you.
And why that change even took place from 22-23 to 23-24.
Quick question on just definitional, but if it's your coding 1250 less restrictive programs. Here's a less restrictive program.
What?
Restrictive versus less restrictive. So special education.
Mhm.
You know,
On revenues
71.
or page 71?
I'm just wondering what's an example of a less restricted program is.
Like if you thought like life skills versus a resource room. So
And 1250 is really your overalls. Your overall sped departments.
Yeah.
Where their ones are specified sped programs.
primarily resource room
Mhm.
type programs. So students who are still receiving a majority of their instruction in the mainstream classroom, but receives additional services by being pulled out in a resource room to receive individualized instruction and then put back into the mainstream, like throughout their day. So it's less restrictive in the sense that they're not removed from the general education classroom a whole day.
Thank you.
And like Title I program, that's our main reading intervention program for elementary school. So Title I funds fund quite a bit of EAs. I mean, you see the numbers there associated with that. We got 2 certified teachers and then a whole bunch of team of educational assistants. So they're providing reading intervention services for students kind of behind in reading. Oh, I see. And then 76 jumps. So you're getting a break there from 74 to 76. 76 is jumping into the food service categories. And food service, they primarily fund themselves. I mean, and we do get support, but they are kind of their own unique kind of budget section here. And then you can see on page 78, is student investment account only. Then on page 79, that student investment account continues and it actually breaks it down into the different levels receiving services from that grant. So instruction, support services.
So this is where the corporate activity tax is being distributed.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Anyone has some other ones? Skipping a page, jumping over to page 82, first future rate reserve. Building up that reserve for rate increases. Page 84 is the overview of the high school success, measure 98. Proposed budget of 710,000, and then on page 85, you can see where that's kind of broken apart by salaries. And again, if you were to align this with the presentation from earlier, you could see who I outlined there that we're paying for. Out of that grant. Page 86, long-term care and treatment. Again, that's disappearing from the proposed budget. Page 88 and 89 is getting into the student activities funds.
Yeah,
So associated student body accounts.
yeah, student body account. So one of the things that you'll notice in the school budget is when you get into the special funds, we want to make sure that there is enough there for us to be able to appropriate. So even though if you look on the proposed budget, student body funds, you're seeing $150,000 and $900,000 and some of those kind of numbers. We don't actually have that in the bank. But if we don't, so instead of trying to put in and guess what we're really going to have in the bank at the end of the year, we put out a number that's well above it, so that when we adopt a budget, we can appropriate those funds for what we actually have in the bank, right? So we never want to accidentally under appropriate that, and then we have student body funds we can't spend unless we do a resolution or something along those lines. So that's why it sometimes will look a little goofy when you're looking at the budget, because how come you got $100,000 in supplies and materials under instruction on your student body fund, right? And that's why, we just stick a number out there that's big enough to make sure that we'll always have enough there.
In the 21-22, you can see, and 22-23, the actuals, so if you went to the high school extracurricular, number 1132, the actuals were 289 and then 468. So we're kind of recovering from COVID, and the activities are increasing. So we're seeing more need for a higher budget. And then again, looking at 23-24, we just had this higher number, like Vince said, so we could use it if we needed to. We won't know the actuals until they're audited.
Can you give me an example of what these little? What do you mean?
Student activity funds?
Real life activity fund, example.
Yes.
In the world.
Think any team has a student activity account that exists within here. So so football, there's chess club, the clubs as well, exactly. So when they're raising money, it's going into this student activity account, so then they could use it specifically for their club or team.
Okay.
One of the things to take us back to our board meeting last week is, as we start selling the tickets for that raffle, that car raffle, all of the funds that are sold are going to end up in here, right on this page.
The county's gonna keep track of it and it goes into each.
And all that's kept track of really at the high school for, out of Mike's office at the high school, and then every school has a person that keeps track of their student body funds. And so, but as we look at it in the big fund picture, this is where we're going to see it. So all of that fund, all the money raised from there is going to go into here, okay, and then it's going to be spent from here, right? And so, that's an example of that. And so, you know, you think about, there was money that, when the choir and the band went to Canada, you know, some of the costs that were incurred in that were their choir funds and band funds and things like that, help pay for pieces and parts of that trip. Okay, so the expenditure from that would come out of here, but then when they raise the money to help them go there, it also goes in here. Cheerleaders do a car wash, it's gonna end up in.
So somewhere there's a breakout to all of the different clubs.
And most of the time that breakout is happening in the school itself.
Yeah, that's all currently done through QuickBooks, but rather than our, it's part of the district, it's part of our audited numbers, but it's done at the school level. We reconcile those accounts at the district level, several times a year to ensure, they're meeting standards, but.
When does that fundraiser start? Does it start now where it's gonna be partly this budget year and partly the next budget year,
Yes.
Yeah, actually, because if any tickets that are sold this year will go into the account, so when it's audited, it will be audited in the 23-24 audit year. And then as it continues on, it'll continue on.
I haven't seen anything, so I'm just curious if it's been like advertised to start with.
We're
Got it up on the block.
Do they?
Yes.
Okay, I haven't seen anything
Not
yet.
today.
Okay.
On a side note, we have to go through a process with the Department of Justice to have them certify the raffle so that the money that we raise, that we sell is certified so that we're not doing an illegal raffle. Okay.
It's kind of
It's a
considered
public
gambling.
meeting. Our counterparts may have thought they could do that and jump the gun just a little bit. We're being a little more careful.
Yeah, we're doing that under one raffle license. I mean, kind of getting off topic here, but under one raffle license with Coos Bay, they're gonna do the reporting on that. It is considered sort of like a form of gambling. You're over a certain amount, so when you're doing a raffle, so even though all the proceeds are going to the schools, so it all has to be reported to the Department of Justice and working in unison with them to make sure we're following the law. And so we're anticipating the week of May 20th, opening up ticket sales.
Thank you for your due diligence.
Keep us out of trouble.
That's right. Getting in the special revenue funds again, 91 miscellaneous grants, so you just got a series of grants kind of rolled in here and how those funds are broken apart.
Real quick.
Yep.
On page 90, the miscellaneous state revenues. What are some examples of those? Because those have actually been pretty high in your actuals. I'm just curious what
32.99.
flows into that.
Yeah, I mean, the miscellaneous revenue, local revenues.
State,
Oh,
Yeah.
state.
32.90.
So we moved a lot of in 299 fund grants into their individual grant numbers, which are tucked into Fund 200 federal/state grants. So that the revenue is following the grants.
Which is why it's going down.
That's why it's going down in this
Move-
fund. This is 299 miscellaneous, and we put them into their individual fund.
So an example would
There's
be,
been other grants that are in here that were being coded to this and now.
yeah.
So I'm moving. fund.
Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, the number of grants over the years is just continuing to increase. And so there was a time when it kind of just made sense to lump them all into this one fund. And so we kind of, the ones that remain consistent, we've just slowly break them out into their own different numbers. Versus having it lumped into there.
And of course, in the revenue line, Jeff, you're seeing aggregated numbers as opposed to disaggregated numbers. So it's hard to identify that they're talking about in this aggregate number.
Correct, yeah.
When if we
ones
disaggregated the set of grants and created a history with that, then you'd get a chance to see where some grants, the history went from one,
As a miscellaneous.
object number to another.
Mhm. So like,
High school success was moved out.
high school success had been in there.
Yeah.
In previous years, now it's in its own line of just high school success, which also makes it easier to do the reporting on. And then like, there was tribal attendance promising practices had been in there. And I put that in its own line item. Great question.
Thank you.
Mhm. Debts, when you get into debt services, 301, you're really essentially looking at not very much money.
Had a couple drop off.
We did have a couple drop off.
We only have the QSCB.
Yeah.
Uh,
USCB bond
Yes, that's all we have left.
is the only debt service we have left here. And this is where we probably, is this the one where we'll see the
In the program, unappropriated.
21, 22? This is where it's built in the old. Built on the bond, no, it's not. Capital projects. This is kind of where we plan for some of the bigger projects like, in the budget for next year, we're planning for it. There's probably more work here than that can get done, but we want to make sure we budget for it in case we can. We have things like roofing, for the kitchen at Hillcrest. Continued with some control work, controls, carrier system controls and boiler work. In life skills building, science buildings, some carpeting at high school, middle school. Some asbestos abatement. Tennis courts resurfacing, we've done half of them, want to do the other half. There's money in here, it's called SB 1149, it's energy projects, so we have we've been receiving funding for an energy project if we come across one that we want to do, so that money's kind of sitting there, waiting for a good energy project. Got a little bit of contingency put in there. And there is some revenue, is there revenue in here from ESSER 3 for the restroom remodel?
Excuse me?
The restroom remodel from ESSER 3? It's not.
No,
in
that's
here.
your reason it's gonna be.
It's not, it's in 29,
Yes.
yeah. I kind of jumped over into informational section. You'll just have the notice of the committee meeting that was published. Last year's minutes from May 18th that were approved. Page 106 is the motion to approve the proposed budget. And set the permanent tax rate.
Tim, I saw someone in the training had asked a question about that and you responded to the board about if that rate could be lower, would the state school fund make that up, which who asked that? That was a good question.
Me.
That was a, I like that, so, and the answer was,
It was a good question. I mean, because you hear about the equalization formula and the property taxes. Well, if we've collected less in property taxes, does the state balance that out? And the answer is if we appropriate the permanent tax rate they do, if we were to lower that permanent tax rate and set it lower, the state's still gonna calculate the state school fund, assuming that you passed the permanent tax rate, so they won't make up the difference. And we would bear the brunt of that. That would be a loss in revenue. Yeah, because it was like, why not, why wouldn't everybody do it?
yeah,
And so that was, appreciated the question. It was an opportunity for me to learn the answer. So thank
I
you.
was just trying to find a way to check that taxes for us.
I don't blame you. Page 107 gets into the actual state school fund estimates. So there you see, there you can kind of see when they talk, okay, so 23-25, the biennium over kind of to the right was 10.2 billion. And then when you look at 23-24, 24-25, you can see what the 49-51 split looks like on a $10.2 billion budget. Then there's a series of what are called carve outs that are things that are funded prior to the money getting distributed to schools. And then when you get to page 108, you see the actual state school fund grant worksheet for North Bend School District. And you can see that 24-25 anticipated property taxes and common school fund, county school fund, and the sum of the local revenues. On the transportation side of that, you see not applicable on most of those because we don't have our own bus company. We contract those services, but we do have transportation expenses because we contract those services. Reimbursed at 70%. On the left, again, there's a teacher experience adjustment. So they take the state average teacher experience and compare it to your district average. You can see our district average is a little bit lower than the state average, so we get a reduced state school fund amount because of that, because it's anticipated that it's cost less to hire those to fund those teachers. And then it follows quite a complex formula. So you get the general purpose grant, and then they take out the local revenue. They take out the transportation grant, and that leaves you with your state school fund grant amount. Which becomes it's about that $30 million mark. And then that is broken down further into your general purpose grant per extended ADMW. That's the amount per student. And on page 109, you can see the weighted formulas, like how many extra kids are getting added to us because of their weights. So for example, 24-25 ADMR is your average daily membership. I mean, you could think of R as like the real student count, the number of kids there in attendance, and that's 2,951. That includes both districts, our district and Evergreen. And then if you kind of look at your students on IEPs, capped at 11% of your ADMR is 324. So there's an extra 324 students added to our population that we receive additional funding on. Is what those weights work out to. As you progress through the year, like you can see in 23-24, they broke our district apart from Evergreen. So when they're looking at the projections into the next school year, they just lump us together. But as the year progresses, they will split us apart. So we can see how the funding affects both districts. Page 110 is a resolution for adopting the budget. which would be the school board, after the budget committee approves it. And we'll work on the order of it a little bit, but next, then we're jumping into, just so you can see that, because of the information section, the senior high school athletics. How many coaches you have, how many teams you have. Which is all great information, because you can see, you know, how many students are we anticipating in those programs. District vehicle inventories next. Our trimester school calendar. And then a chart of accounts. That talks about the funds. And the functions. And then it gets a little bit deeper into the weeds, cost center, areas of responsibility, so all the different things that we could code something to, and then objects as well. So there's different ways that we can actually dive into what we're spending money on and report on it. A lot of information. And that concludes my presentation for tonight. If we have any, you know, kind of generalized questions, we could kind of review those, or we could, again, emailing you the stuff you want to dive into a little bit more, or the budget committee email address. And that's for the public as well. The public has questions or comments about the budget. The email is budget committee comments. All one word, budget committee comments. .nbend. .k12.or.us, and that is on page 104. On the notice of budget committee that was published. So that was published. I was kind of reading that out in case our viewing audience was wondering what that email was. I anticipate a lot of people watching this. And then, or you could email me at tcrider@nbend.k12.org.us.
Is there any more questions? Now I'd like to make a motion.
Chair Dillard, if I could make a couple of comments. I would like to thank the appointed budget committee members for taking the interest to do this. I recognize there are 3 new appointed members that have, I don't know, relationships with district personnel. I would like to thank them in particular for participating. Thank you for that. Finance team, great job, great overview. And Michelle, what do we got next Thursday evening?
Same place, same time, it's 5 o'clock,
Okay.
district office, 6 o'clock here.
Great. I'm good, sir.
All right, thank you. I would like to make a motion that we recess.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So